There's growing anger in Russia over the forced mobilization of men to fight in the war in Ukraine. President Putin had said the call-up was a temporary measure, but today the Kremlin refused to say when it'll end. As Russian forces struggle to hold territory in Ukraine, men with no military experience are being sent to the front line to fight and often to die. Our Russia editor Steve Rosenberg reports.
This is the picture the Kremlin is trying to paint. Putin, the strong man. The caring commander-in-chief. And Russians lining up to do their patriotic duty, mobilized to fight in Ukraine. These alleged recruits are well equipped. But these aren't. For weeks now, mobilized Russians have been complaining of a lack of resources and training. These men say they've been given old guns and no helmets or body armor. Mobilization has sparked deep alarm in Russian society. This human rights group is giving advice on what to do if your loved ones are sent to the front line. As you can see, it's packed. The Kremlin says that more than 200,000 reservists have been called up to fight. With mobilization, what is happening in Ukraine has suddenly become very real for the Russian public. Now, the Kremlin wants Russians to believe that those people who've been drafted into the army are being sent off to defend the motherland. But not everyone here believes that. The voice belongs to Mikhail Ashichev. 500 miles from Moscow, he told the local military draft office he wasn't going to fight because there was no threat to Russia. Mikhail insists that if Russia truly needed defending, he would rush to volunteer. He considers himself a patriot, but he doesn't believe in this war. He won't fight in Ukraine.
When mobilization was being discussed, I agreed with my family that if such a situation arose, I would refuse, even if they sent me to prison. If I had to, I would choose prison. The state will consider me a criminal if I don't go to fight in this war. But I won't be a criminal from the point of view of humanity or myself.
After his refusal to fight, Mikhail has received some abuse on Russian social media. But what is interesting is that he's had plenty of support, too, for his decision to take a moral stand. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
People were killed in Thursday's missile strike and 10 others were injured. That's happening as Russia conducts a mass evacuation of civilians from the city. Fred Pleitgen has all the details.
As Ukrainian forces press their counter-offensive in the country's south, Russia is resorting to what appear to be increasingly desperate measures in the areas they control in the Kherson region. Thousands of people waiting to be evacuated by boat. The puppet authorities installed by Moscow claiming they've already taken some 15,000 out of Kherson City. Why did you decide to evacuate, the reporter asks. I have a small child to take care of, you see, the woman answers. Russia says it's ferrying these people to safety. The Ukrainians say these are little more than deportations. Russia has imposed martial law in this and other areas of Ukraine controlled by its forces. The Russians say they are increasing the intensity of their mobilization effort. Russian President Vladimir Putin visiting soldiers outside Moscow and himself even firing a sniper rifle. And Putin's continued aerial assault on Ukraine's energy infrastructure is starting to take a toll. Ukraine's authorities announcing the need for partial blackouts in most of the country as intense strikes on power plants continue using cheap kamikaze drones, which Kiev says Iran has provided to the Russian army. The spokeswoman for Russia's foreign ministry rejecting the allegations.
Я думаю, нет, поскольку все это не более чем набор.
This is nothing more than a collection of unsubstantiated inferences and far-fetched assumptions that Britain and France are trying to build into a structure. And every time, it all collapses in front of everyone.
But on Russian TV, this military expert and defense ministry advisor seemed to admit the origin of the drones, not realizing his mic was hot. He tells the host,
Let's not shake the boat too much. We all know that they are Iranian, but the authorities do not admit that.
But the Russians are now admitting things are not going well on the battlefield. The top commander acknowledging his force's position in Ukraine's south is, quote, tense. Fred Pleitgen, CNN, Kramatorsk, Ukraine.
CNN's Barbara Starr joins us from the Pentagon. So, Barbara, what more are we learning about the Iranian support there in Crimea and why it's impacting the U.S.'s speed here in response?
Well, what we know now from both the White House and the Pentagon is they've come to the assessment, the conclusion, if you will, not just that Iran is supplying drones to Russia to attack inside Ukraine, but that some number of Iranian forces have gone to the Crimea area where these drones are flying from to facilitate the operation there, whether they're training the Russians or just facilitating the operation. There have been Iranian troops inside Crimea. This is where the drones are being launched from. And as you say, these are drones that fly to a target, guided, and explode on impact. These are the drones that the Russian forces are using to some considerable effect in attacking civilian targets, power plants, apartment buildings, killing civilians. Now, the Ukrainians have been able to bring down, shoot down any number of them. So it's not like all the drones are getting through to their target, and they're essentially seen as weapons of terror to terrorize the population. You know, but make no mistake, there's a couple of things on the calendar that everybody's watching, and front and center is the winter weather is coming. So both the Ukrainians and the Russians are going to want to solidify their battle positions and get into place if they need to wait out the winter. And for Ukraine, that means they are still pressing very hard, very understandably in their view, for an acceleration of that air defense capability. The U.S. is speeding up the delivery of some of the air defense. It's promised also both the U.K. and Germany contributing to the air defense equipment being shipped to Ukraine, but Ukraine clearly feels in this situation it needs more and it needs it fast. Bianna?
Yeah, concerns not only about the drones, but potential missiles, ballistic missiles and surface-to-surface missiles that Iran may be supplying to Russia as well. Barbara Starr, thank you. Well, Ukrainian forces fighting to wrench back territory from Russia in the east have reportedly hit the Luhansk region with American-made rocket systems called HIMARS, killing 6 in 24 hours. That's according to pro-Russian officials in the region. But Russian attacks on the power grid in Ukraine have made daily life even harder for civilians. The country has lost at least 40% of its electricity generation, forcing scheduled blackouts nationwide.
Thank you, and glory to Ukraine.